Hey guys, so in this video I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about the New Caledonian Crested Gecko. Here's one right here. Some other names for it might be just a Crested Gecko, or some pet stores also call them eyelashed Crested Geckos, which you might be able to see his eyelashes. If I can get a good shot of him here. The Crested Geckos are named after that because of the crests that go along their head, and some of the Crested Geckos' crests actually go all the way down to the end of their tail. This Crested Gecko is a bit older. He's about 25 grams. That's how they're usually measured in grams. The usual adult size is about 30 to 35. They can get a lot bigger than that. You can get really chubby geckos that can get around 40 to 50. But this guy's still growing. I say he's a guy, but in reality he's a girl. You can't really tell until they get to an older age, unless you're good at figuring it out based on their pores, which is not the easiest thing to do. They're called New Caledonian Crested Geckos because they live off an island called New Caledonia. They like to jump, as you can see. The island New Caledonia is actually right next to Australia. It's a forest environment, so that's what you have to try to imitate in your tank when you get one. They're arboreal, meaning that they live in trees as opposed to the ground, so they prefer tanks that are taller rather than wider. What I mean by that is not as much ground clearance, since they're not usually on the ground, more of a higher up because they're typically in a tree or on a vine or what have you. In their natural environment, they usually only go down to the ground of the forest to pick up food. One neat thing about them is their toes. They have a sort of sticky hair-like material, and that allows them to pretty much stick to just about anything. They can climb glass. They typically climb on the ceiling of their tanks a lot. They're also very jumpy. They like jumping around. They're pretty good. They can do some pretty good distance with it, actually. They're pretty active geckos. This one, obviously, is not the most active. I picked him to do this video because he's rather lax, and he's not jumping around and running away from me. I can kind of just keep him there, and he'll just stick around and do whatever. But he's a pretty good gecko. A little bit of things about him. They are omnivores, meaning they can eat more than just insects. Typically in nature they eat fruit and bugs. So you cannot feed them just insects. In fact, I feed my crested geckos something called Repashy Crested Gecko Diet, and it's a complete meal. It's just a powder that you mix with water, and it gives them just about everything they need. So they don't even need crickets. They don't need anything. All they need is that, and it provides all the calcium, all the vitamins, exactly everything to keep them healthy. So it's nice because you don't have to worry about it. I used to have leopard geckos, and you kind of had to wonder, how much calcium are you to supplement with the crickets and stuff like that. And these are nice for people whose family may not want live insects to be in their home because you don't need to. A lot of owners do give their crested geckos crickets or mealworms or something on occasion as a treat, or even once a week. I do that every now and then. They do really love crickets, most of them anyway. So it's nice to have every now and then. One thing about crested geckos is one thing that they will need is foliage. Crested geckos are pretty defenseless. They don't really have any teeth. I've been bitten by one on accident who thinks that, I'm a cricket. And it's not much. The only real defense they have is their tail. And what happens is if a predator grabs them by the tail, they have these muscles that can actually release the tail, and it'll start wagging and jiggling and all that stuff, and it'll scare the predator, or the predator will just eat his tail and the crested gecko will run off. You rarely find a crested gecko in nature that has a tail, so it's pretty easy for them to lose them, so you have to be careful when handling it. It's recommended you don't pull it or tug on it or anything. This crested gecko, like I said, he's pretty lax, so I can touch it, and I haven't pulled him by it, but I've done probably a little bit more than most geckos would do. As you see, he's kind of burying himself inside the leaves. One thing that these guys need is some place to hide, because like I said, they can easily be eaten, basically. I mean, they're pretty easy prey in the wild, so naturally their natural instinct is to hide. And let me tell you, you put these guys in a small tank with a few leaves and you can never find them. They're pretty amazing. So it's very important that you give them a lot of places to hide, and that way it does not stress them out. Another thing about them is they are nocturnal. So he's a little groggy right now because it's about 5 o'clock and he usually doesn't get up for another few hours, but he's okay. But yeah, so most of their activity is at night. They like jumping around and stuff like that. If you have another gecko by their tank, they usually just like watching the other gecko. So for lengths wise, I'll try to show you. Like I said, this is an almost adult, and with his head to his tail, he's a pretty good size. So he won't get too much bigger than that. The ideal tank for an adult crested gecko is probably a 12 by 12 by 18. Those actually might even be a little too small. Some people recommend about a 20. I think a 12 by 12 by 18 is a little less than a 20. So an adult would want a 20-gallon tank. Another thing in their tank that they need is vines, things that they can climb on, things like that. Fresh water, obviously. One big thing with them is the required temperatures that they need to be in. They're usually good in colder temperatures, and I typically don't even worry about my geckos when they're in about 55-degree weather, which can happen sometimes here during the winter. And they're fine, they're pretty resilient. But one thing you have to really worry about is heat. Anything higher than 80 degrees for too long can kill them. That's the one thing. So if you're living in an environment where it gets a lot hotter than that, air conditioning is definitely required, something to that effect. I mean, I don't even like when it hits 80. I usually like to keep it 77 or below. So that's one major thing. Other than that, they're pretty resilient geckos, pretty tough. They like jumping around and slamming their faces into glass and stuff like that. I don't know why, but yeah. Other than the whole temp thing, they're pretty tough guys. Like I said, he's probably one of my most slow geckos. I have two other ones, and they all come in different colors. This guy, he's kind of dull. When he's fired up being when they change color, they can change from one major color to another. It's not like they can go, brown to purple or whatever, but like he goes from this brown to a really dark brown, and I have a yellow orange one, and it basically just gets brighter, and the change in coloration is usually a result of their stress level or temperature or something like that. So they have that almost chameleon-like ability. It's not really for blending in with anything or anything like that. Like I said, it's more of their mood or whatever. But yeah, like I said, this guy is pretty slow. The yellow one, like I was saying, is pretty jumpy, pretty crazy. Always curious, and I would bring him out, but yeah, I'd be afraid he'd probably run away. So that's pretty much it for this video. I thought I'd just show you a basic idea of a Crested Gecko, maybe if you were interested. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, please do me a favor and just leave a comment, like, subscribe, whatever it is, and thanks for watching.